I remember it feeling like everyone was looking forward to the Avengers. After all, it was the first time in recent decades several major film franchises crossed over, and Marvel was putting to the test whether or not the concept of a mega crossover could work on the big screen, and for that matter, if it could work in the action genre, as previously big crossovers were mostly a horror trope. Think Freddy vs. Jason, Alien vs. Predator, or the numerous examples Universal churned out with their monsters during the 30s and 40s. Anyhow, let's take a look back at Marvel's The Avengers. Avengers follows Thor, Captain America, Iron Man, Hulk, Black Widow, and Hawkeye, who converge after Loki begins to harness the power of the Tesseract. See my Captain America the First Avenger video for more information on that. The team butts heads, but ultimately comes together to defeat Loki and his army of Chitauri soldiers. The plot has slightly more to do than that, but we'll get back to that soon. The idea for the Avengers began in 2003, but essentially went nowhere when Marvel began releasing its own films. However, eventually the plans were revived. Marvel had a plan to establish their own characters with their own films, which ended up working out and laid the groundwork for the MCU. In 2010, Joss Whedon signed on as director and began reworking the script, and the Hulk would be recast from Ed Norton to Mark Ruffalo. Marvel claimed that Norton wasn't a team player, while Norton said he didn't want to be locked into the Hulk role. Either way, the studio would move on from Norton and go on to Ruffalo, who has played the Hulk ever since. It's worth noting this decision did not decanonize Norton's Incredible Hulk, with several key actors returning down the line, and that film being referenced in the Avengers. So Avengers films tend to have a lot of characters and a lot of plot lines, so buckle in for this. Iron Man, or Tony Stark, is working on rebuilding Stark Tower when he's called to join the Avengers, despite his previous denial of the role. Captain America, or Steve Rogers, is called in as he's adjusting to the new world he finds himself trapped in. In the film, he finds himself at odds with Tony and his pessimistic worldview, but ultimately proves to be a strong leader during the Battle of New York towards the end of the film. The Hulk, or Bruce Banner, is called in to help trace the gamma signatures coming off the Tesseract, but eventually has to become the Hulk during the Battle of New York to help defend the city. He probably has the most complicated arc in the film, having to ultimately come to terms with his bad side while the world is in need. Thor joins the Avengers since Loki, his brother, is getting out of hand with his use of the Tesseract, and Thor wants to take it from him. Sadly, there isn't a ton to say about Thor in this film. Black Widow, or Natasha Romanoff, must put her spying aside and help the Avengers fight the Chitauri. Meanwhile, she's also trying to solve the puzzle of why her friend Hawkeye has gone rogue. Hawkeye, or Clint Barton, is a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent who's quickly possessed by Loki towards the end of the second act. He snaps out of his hypnosis and helps the other Avengers during the Battle of New York. Loki wants the power of the Tesseract to take over the world. He's able to do this through his army of Chitauri fighters, with help from people he brainwashes along the way as well. Phil Coulson is a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent who's a super fan of Captain America and helped assemble the Avengers. Midway through the film, he's killed, however, and this is used to rally the Avengers into assembling during the Battle of New York. Nick Fury assembles the Avengers due to the threat of invasion, while simultaneously trying to get through the red tape and politics one would expect from fighting off an alien invasion. As for the Avengers as a whole, I think it was a pretty good starting lineup. However, in the comics, the team was slightly different when they formed, consisting of Iron Man, Hulk, Thor, Ant-Man, and the Wasp, with Captain America coming in issue 4. Hawkeye makes a lot of sense as an addition to the starting roster, as he's pretty notable being a long-standing Avenger. However, Black Widow was never a consistent staple of the Avengers. This film has the first instance of our main villain of the Infinity Saga, Thanos, briefly showing up. It's nothing special, but it was a big moment seeing this in theaters as a comic fan, and especially cool given how well the Infinity Saga turned out as a whole. The Avengers has a fair bit of equipment and other gadgets, but surprisingly not as much new stuff as you may expect. It has the Tesseract again, which has the Space Stone from the Infinity Stones, but the film also has Loki's Scepter, which can control minds and shoot energy beams. This is due to the fact that it harnesses the power of the Mind Stone, which we will talk about in a future video. In terms of Iron Man's armors, Tony hasn't started the film with an upgrade, still rocking the Mach 6 from Iron Man 2, but by the end of the film he gets his Mach 7, which is visually similar to his Mach 4 armor, but can now be called on demand through bracelets that Tony can wear. Captain America gets a new shield in the film, along with a new armor, which modernizes his World War II look. Along with those, Hawkeye shows off his bow and quiver set for the first time, along with an appearance from Black Widow's stingers. This may be a hot take, but I'm not in love with the Avengers. The dialogue is a little stilted and cheesy, the cinematography is fucking awful, and the film is kind of soap opera-y. But I do find the action pretty fun, and Robert Downey Jr., Tom Hiddleston, and Chris Evans have standout performances in the film. The biggest problem is a lot of the movie is flat and boring, both to watch and to look at. This isn't a favorite of mine overall, and I think it falls pretty far below the other three Avengers films. And while I don't love the movie, Avengers has one of the standout scores of the MCU. It's catchy, intense, and gives me goosebumps. It certainly elevates the sequences that it's in, and that final battle when it plays is just downright inspiring. For this video, I'd recommend reading at least Avengers 1 through 4 from the original comic run by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. It'll familiarize you with most of the characters and give you an understanding of how the Avengers differ between the page and the screen. Much like a lot of these films from Phase 1, this film does include a one-shot on the Blu-ray, and I believe they're on Disney Plus as well. And this one is Item 47. It's our next short film, and probably the first one that's a legit short film, being 12 minutes in length and having more of a narrative structure than the past ones, which are more like bonus clips. This stars Benny and Claire, who commit a series of robberies after getting a Chitauri weapon and eventually being caught and joining S.H.I.E.L.D. It's a little boring, but it's directed well enough, and it's an amusing enough bonus feature. Overall, this is a cool event film, but has been replaced in scope and general cinematic achievement with better MCU event films like Captain America Civil War, Avengers Infinity War, or Avengers Endgame. And while it has a handful of moments, I think this film has some of the worst directing and cinematography of the wider MCU, only really saved by an okay, albeit boring at times, script. Our next video is going to be the final Iron Man film, as of now at least. Iron Man 3, which as I remember was a favorite of mine, but I suppose we'll find out next time.